part 2 now. We're going on to the actual cutting of the salwar. We've taken the measurements. There's some very brief few measurements that I've already previously mentioned. You want the full length, and you need to add and subtract certain parts from that. Now we've done like a rough sketch of, and it's not very good. I'll try and do a better one and upload the image of it, but I'll explain and it'll become self-explanatory. That part is actually the fabric we're talking about, but the best way to explain this would be if I fold this piece of paper in half and then in half again. So you imagine this is 2.5 or 2.25 yards of fabric, okay? And what we're going to be doing is at the moment we're opened that up and we're only using part of that, okay? So if we're using part of that, what we've got is we're going to take the length from there, we're going to take the crutch from this part, so, and then we're going to have that piece excess left out. So you've got basically poncha there, crutch there, the width of the salwar, the length of the salwar, and this part you're going to take away, and then hopefully that part that we've got left over from there we're going to use for our belt, okay? So to transfer all that onto the fabric, it means I've got my length, which it was going to be 35 complete. So I've taken out the measurements for the belt and I've added the extension for the poncha. So this is 35 inches, and then the poncha is going to be, that's going to be the finished poncha, but I need it slightly more so that when I turn that over it covers the part that is got the slant in. So the poncha that I've left is 8 inches, and then I've sort of increased it by 1.5 inches. So at the bottom here I've marked it off at 9 inches, and then I've angled it in about 1.5 inches because I will be using a 1-inch bukram, which is the interfacing, to stiffen the bottom of the poncha. Okay, so I'm going to be using a 1-inch. If you're going to be using a wider bukram or interfacing, then you need to make sure that you leave this a little bit longer. Or the other thing is, if you're running short on fabric, you can take the whole of that away and you can add an extension. But adding an extension means extra work. If you've got fabric, then I would recommend just using the same fabric. Going to the other side, the other corner, we're going to be measuring the crutch. Now the length, standard size of a crutch on a female salwar is 16 inches. On a male it's about 18 inches. So on a men's salwar they have like 18 inches. But on a female salwar, we tend to keep about 16, 15, 16, depending on where you wear your salwar as well. If you're going to wear your salwar on your waist, then you want the crutch a little bit longer. If you're going to wear your salwar on the hips, then the crutch will be shorter. Otherwise, you will have the crutch hanging too low and the salwar will not look proper. Okay, so I like to wear my salwar high, and I normally keep 10 inches the crutch level. So 10 inches from the top I've measured down and just marked it off with a crayon or a chalk. And then you need either a stiff stick, or if you're going to use a tape measure, you need to make sure you hold it taut, you know, pull it and hold it straight. And you can, to mark it out, you don't have to, you know, put a straight line. You can actually just not put small dots and it will still guide you. Okay, so you don't have to, you can guide yourself on cutting off that. So we're going to cut it in two portions because it's a lot easier to lay out and to okay. And the only thing, this has been pressed, but we are going to notch this in the center. Okay, so from the remainder, now I was a little bit short on fabric. Okay, so and You have to work with, sometimes you have problems with the fabric as well. Now what I've done is I've actually cut into this fabric for some reason. So what I'm going to do is, ordinarily I would have cut the other part. I'll explain both ways and then it's easy to understand. Ordinarily I would have cut this like this. So both my pieces, well, I can actually still cut it. I've got enough fabric. I was a little bit worried that I didn't have enough fabric. Okay, and I'm going to leave that to cut the belt. But if you think you're running short on the belt fabric there, then what you can do is, if you've got excess fabric, I can bring it up to here, this part. See, I've got a cut in the fabric. Normally, even if you have 2 yards of fabric, you can actually get away with it. But the shopkeeper will insist that you need 2.5 because they've got to sell the fabric to make their money. Majority of the suits come with 2.5 yards or 2.25 yards of fabric. You can, depending on what price the fabric is as well, if a fabric is maybe £4 or £5 a yard, then why spend £2.50 on an extra half a yard if you can get away with, and especially if they're selling it on a roll, you can opt to buy less, you can save, and you know, as long as you know the methods and techniques, you don't. But it's not normally because of the money saving tip that I offer that advice. Sometimes you don't have no other option but to work with less fabric. Say you go to a shop and you can't find a matching, and the shopkeeper has only got 2 yards of fabric, and you're hesitant, well, if I buy 2 yards I won't have enough. But then there's the chances that you will not find that fabric, that color at all. So what are your options? Your option is to know how to cut from that small amount and still get the result, rather than going to 100 shops trying to, you know, and spending all that extra time and effort in trying to find something. So, you know what, it's in our own benefit that we learn the methods. Yeah. So I'm going to cut the other now. Ordinarily, if there wasn't a problem with the fabric, I'd take it right up and I'll, you know, but because we've got a problem with the fabric, I'm gonna, I mean, I bought 2.5 yards and I wanted it for something else, and I've taken out some of this. So it's a lot easier to cut an identical second one, because all you're doing is laying the template of the first on top of the second, and you can cut a template like this in your size. Keep it to a size and side, and every time you want to cut a salwar, you can just lay your fabric and just cut a same one, rather than keep on measuring, and you know. So it's a good idea to cut it, to fold it, and to put in an envelope, and you know what, next time just use that. And you don't have to cut 2 legs, you could only have to cut 1 leg. So any leftover piece, that's your other bit of advice. Now the belt, you can cut the belt in either 2 pieces or in a single piece. If you've got enough fabric, then normally just a single piece. We have to put a joint in because we're using the remainder of the fabric that was left. Okay, it's better to always learn the harder way than to use the easy option. But then when it comes to sewing, use the easy option. Does that make sense? Learn the hard one, but apply the easy one. Okay. So for the belt, what did we say? Okay. Now then, I've taken my hip measurements. I think everybody should know my size by now. The public knowledge. That's embarrassing, that is. I know people who don't want to tell their size. Anyway, I'm not bothered. Okay, so it's the size of the hip measurement plus 4 inches. I'm going to be cutting double on this. So what I've got is half of that and then a half of that again. So I'm only cutting a quarter here. Yeah. So what I wanted was 45 inches. So half of 45 is 22 and a half, and then half of 22 and a half. You know, 21. I would say 11 inches. I'm not going to go into minute details. So I want 11 inches in this belt. And the length of the belt, I want it 9 inches, which makes it just absolutely right. And we just want to mark this off into like a rectangle. Is it a rectangle? And that basically is the two portions of the belt opened up. That's what it'll be. So you've got that one seam is going to come to the front of the salwar, the other seam is going to come to the back of the salwar, and we're going to put a couple of notches on there. So we're going to half it, and we're going to put a notch there, and then just the one side. So just the two of the pieces I've picked up, two pieces I've left at the bottom, and I halved it again, and I'm going to put another notch in there. Okay, and that basically is the full salwar. So the next part then is going to be the explanation of assembling this.